Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to share 3 secrets that nobody else wants to tell you about concrete. But first, let me tell you a little bit about this job right here. We're doing a generator pad. It's about 6.5 feet wide, it's about 17 feet long, about 9 inches thick. Going to have a generator sitting on it, kind of like that big one way out in the back you can see up next to that building. This is kind of like an old person's home, an old folks home, I guess if you want to call it that. So they can't have the power go out. The power's got to continuously be running. So they're upgrading their generator, and they hired us to do a generator pad. So the first secret that nobody wants to tell you about concrete is if you live in a freeze-thaw area like we do. We live in Maine, so we get a winter here. We're pretty cold winters from December, January, and February. Then March, things start to warm up. But the ground freezes. Now, if you don't want your concrete to move, you got to put 2 inches of styrofoam under it like we have here and run it out by the edges a little bit. The 2 inches of styrofoam are going to help prevent the ground from freezing underneath the concrete. Then the slab won't heave, and then in this case, the generator won't move and probably crack some of the piping it has going to it. Hey everybody, today's video is being sponsored by the Concrete Underground. The Concrete Underground is where I have all my training videos. If you want to learn how to do concrete like we do, you can join this. Come in here. All my training videos are in here. They're all in obviously video format, and you'll learn from me the way I do concrete. The link to join is down in the description below, so head down there and check it out. Now, one of the other keys for that is you got to have gravel underneath the styrofoam. You can't just throw it on the grass or on something like clay, something that's going to hold water. You got to have something gravel under there that's permeable so water will run through it. And that's one key. And I mean, I get we put styrofoam under almost everything exterior here in Maine, and that's the reason why. Now that styrofoam's expensive. A 4x8 sheet 2 inches thick is going to run you about $50. So, I mean, right here we got about 6 sheets. There's $300 just in styrofoam right here. Now, what we also have, another secret that we do on this exterior stuff, in order for it to be a little bit stronger, a little bit easier to finish for us, is we use a higher PSI, a higher cement content concrete. So this is a 4,000 PSI. Sometimes we use a 4,500 PSI. So we have more cement in the concrete mix. That does a few things for us. Number one, obviously it raises the PSI, right? Makes it a little stronger than maybe your typical concrete floor mix. But what it also does is the more cement in the mix, the more heat of hydration, the quicker it's going to set up for us. So in this case today, where we're working in the shade pretty much, that's going to be a bonus for us. Now, if we're working out in the sun, it's 90 degrees, that might not be a bonus. But today, a higher cement content in the concrete is going to be a big bonus. And then another thing, when we go to finish the concrete, having a little bit more cement in the mix is going to make the surface a little bit easier to finish, a little bit creamier is the word that we use. It's going to have more paste at the surface for you to work up when you mag it, and for those of you who trowel it. So going up with a little bit higher PSI concrete is another secret that probably most people don't tell you. And if you're ordering concrete for some type of job like this, or a sidewalk or a patio, and you want to go up a little bit higher with your concrete, it's going to cost a little bit more, a few more bucks a yard, but overall it's going to make the job a little bit better. Now, because this thing's 9 inches thick, you can see they didn't have anything here for backfill for us, so we brought some what we call kickers with us, and we got a string around the outside edge, and we're just making sure, because it's 9 inches thick, there's a little bit of pressure on those boards. Luke's just going to go around and double check, make sure everything's perfectly straight as we pour, and just put in a few kickers here and there while I continue on with the pour. Now, I like, when we set the form, we came here the day before and got this prep, so we other than the gravel, we don't do the gravel work. We put styrofoam down. We set up the forms. We set them to grade with a laser. We actually slope this just a tiny bit away from that garage over there. And then one key for us, one thing that makes our job a little bit easier is when we set the forms right to grade. And not only does that give us something to go by when we're pouring, but then we can mag We like to mag our edges nice and neat and clean before we screed the concrete like this. You can see how it keeps the concrete off the top of the form. And then that just works so much better. It'll work even better when we go to bull float here in a minute too. I'll show you that. So I've shared a couple secrets with you that most people won't tell you when they're pouring concrete. I got one more to go when we start finishing. I'll share that one with you. Let's get through the pour. So we got about 4 yards of concrete here. Now again, I told you we got about $300 in styrofoam. We got, I think there was about 10 or 12 bar, 20-foot bars of rebar there. You know, those you can usually buy those for $10 to $15 a stick. So you know, you got another $100, $150 there. And then the concrete, we got 4 yards of concrete. You know, when I figure concrete in my head, I just figure it at $200 a yard. Usually I can buy it. When they bill me for it, it's a little cheaper than that. But, you know, with the fiber mesh in it, you know, it's the state tax with it, I just usually figure $200 a yard. So $800 there. So we got about, you know, $1,200 just in those three materials, the concrete, the styrofoam, and the rebar. So really, the only thing left to price is the labor. You know, the labor for us to drive here a day in advance and get it all prepped. And then for Luke and I to come and pour this. Now, I don't, for something this small, you know, basically 6.5 by 17, I have a minimum charge. I don't charge anything less than $2,500 to do a small job. So that's what I would start at here. If I was pricing this for somebody, it would be $2,500 labor. And then I'd figure out the materials. I usually add 10 to 15% to the materials. So if that's $1,200 in materials, you know, that's another $120, $150 for that. So let's just say $1,500 materials, $2,500 for labor. You got a $4,000 concrete pad right here for our generator. If you know, hopefully helps you, gives you a little bit of an idea of what something like this might cost you. Now that doesn't include the excavator. The people we're working for actually hired a guy with an excavator to come in here, a small one, a mini excavator, and he dug out about a foot of that grass you see. He put back in 6 inches of gravel, and he compacted that and got that all nice and level for us. But he had a bunch of other work to do here too. He had to dig a trench for all those pipes. You can see the pipes, they run all the way to the building, and then he had some other stuff to do. So I don't know what they charge for the excavation, but I would assume it would probably be about $1,000 for something like this, you know, to dig it out, bring the gravel, level it, you know, shoot your grades. So you got about a $5,000 concrete pad here to put that generator on. Now I know that sounds like a lot of money, but I mean, and it is a lot of money. That's just what things go for nowadays, and that's in Maine. If you live in a different state where, you know, the cost of living is higher, that could be a lot more. That could be double of what this is here in Maine. Now, so for Luke and I, you know, we show up the day before, and the prep for us is two guys. Probably, I don't know, it probably took us 2 hours to get this prepped. And then, you know, I call concrete. Concrete shows up here. You know, the travel time, the amount of time we're here pouring and finishing is probably, this stuff's set up pretty good on us today. So I'm going to say 3 hours from the time we started pouring until the time we got done brooming. And then we came back, we had to come back the following day and strip the forms off. So, you know, add another hour in there for another guy. So you get about 6 hours here. But as far as man hours, you got 6 and 8 is 14, so about 15 total man hours here. All right, so we had used our little mini bow float, got it bow floated. I got out now I'm using my funny float, and I'm just going over it again just to close up the surface really nice while it's still pretty good and soft. Luke's gonna go around the edges and kind of touch up the edges where the bow float didn't get. And then what we can do is if we have time, we'll just let it sit until it gets to a certain firmness that we like before we start magging this out again and putting the broom finish on it. I mean, all concrete finishers have their way of doing things. You know, we're going to put an edge. We're going to put an edger around this. Some guys would be edging this right now. We don't. We like to let it firm up just a little bit before we start running the edger across it. But It's perfectly fine, you know, whatever works for you. We've just found the ways that work for us really good, and that's what we do. You can see when we mag float stuff, you know, I've had a lot of guys tell me you're supposed to hold that mag perfectly flat when you do that, and that's the absolute wrong thing to do. You know, I've been finishing concrete 45 years. Luke's been doing about 25 years. When you mag float like that, you can see he's tipping it up in the way he's going just a tiny little bit. That way that front edge doesn't dig in. You know, the argument from some of these other guys is, well, it's beveled a little bit. Well, yeah, it is beveled just a little bit, but you still need to tip it a little bit one way or the other. That's going to make it work so much easier. So take my advice. If you mag float concrete, if you're just learning, you watch Luke right there. He's slightly tipping it up in the direction he's going. It just makes things flow a lot bit easier. It's more ergonomically correct to do it that way, and the surface of the concrete just closes up a little bit better. All right, so what we did was we gave it about 30 minutes, and then the firmness it's at right now, like if you were to press down with that with your fingers, with your hand, you could still press down about 3/8 of an inch pretty easily. So it's firmed up quite a bit, but it's not so soft that, you know, you're just going to sink that edger in and then have the edges fall right back in instead of hold their shape. You can see Luke's kind of touching up the edge. He's making sure that if there is any little tiny high spots right along the form, you know, he's just scraping that off, then matching that form really good. And he's having to put a little bit of pressure down on it. And again, you can see the way he's floating that. He's tipping that mag up. It just works faster. It just works better that way, guys. So the third secret I'm going to share with you is this. This is what we do probably that's different than most people. And we found it works really good for us up here in Maine because we have a lot of freeze-thaw cycles. And there's a lot of arguments about this too, but this is what works good for us is we don't steel trowel or Fresno our concrete, right? Like that's probably what someone would be doing right now at this point. We'll just mag float it again. We'll mag float it twice if we have to and get it really nice and tight before we run the broom on it. So most people, you know, they're not going to tell you that. They're going to say, no, you got to steel trowel it and get it smooth. Well, you don't. In order to get a really nice, good, tight broom finish on it, you can just continue to mag float it a little bit. So now, can you steel trowel it if you want to? Sure. The reason we don't is what we found in the past, like way in the past when we used to do that, is our concrete has air entrainment in it. So it's got about 5 to 6% air entrainment injected in the concrete. And those are little tiny microscopic air bubbles in there. And they're to help with the freezing and thawing. So when water gets on this and it soaks down into the concrete and it freezes, the water wants to expand inside the concrete. Well, if it didn't have those tiny little microscopic air bubbles in there, the water wouldn't have any place to expand in there without just popping the concrete, especially the surface. So with those in there, you know, we don't want to seal that air off. A little bit of air escapes out the surface as you finish it, like right now. So if we hard trowel that surface, we kind of seal that surface off. You can trap some of that air under there and cause like a little bubble or a blister. Especially what we found in the spring and late in the fall when the temperatures go from really cold at night to really warm during the day. When you have those big temperature swings, you're more likely to create blisters on this one on air entrained concrete. So we just, over the years, we'll just mag float this out like we're doing right now. Make sure everything gets looking really good, really clean, and then we can just run the broom over it. Now we're in the shade again today. Remember I said that earlier, we're not having to worry about the sun being on this. If we did, we'd probably hustling a little bit quicker, but we do have a really high PSI concrete, so it is firming up on us pretty good. You can see I put the funny float down. Now I'm just reaching out with my mag again and touching up the edges a little bit better, cleaning things up around that edge. I want to take out that edge mark that he made before we broom it and make sure that's really good and flat around the edge. That way that's not going to show up afterwards. And Luke's trying to go around that box the best he can. they made us box that out around those pipes. They wanted those pipes to be able to kind of be free floating just a little bit in there. They didn't want concrete right up against them, just in case there ever was any movement with the generator. Although they don't really count on it, but that's just what we were told to do. So we're just edging that so we can get them forms out a little bit easier tomorrow. You can see how Luke kind of scrapes up a little bit of the surface with that edger. And what that does is it gives him a little bit of paste on the edge of that edger, and he can, if he's got any rock holes or places he's got to touch up, that fills them right in really fast. And then I can go right over that place he scraped and just fill it right in with my mag. I'm just telling them, hey, there was one little rock hole here. If you could just touch that up a little bit, clean that rock hole up. When we go to broom it, we don't want it to hit that rock and just roll that rock and create a void. So he's just cleaning that one little spot up. Now, if this was in the sun, you know, I left this mostly in real time, pretty much. I took out some of the dead spots, but if this was in the sun, we'd probably be done by now. We'd be hustling a little bit quicker. We'd have to get a broom on this really quick because the sun, you know, we're lucky the sun's coming up on the other side of this garage and not just the opposite. If the sun was beating against that wall, it would probably be like 20 degrees hotter right here, and this stuff would just flash. It would take right off. Now really the only thing that's going to be seen on this slab is about, you can see on that slab in the back, maybe a little bit more than a foot all the way around the outside edge. But we still want to make it all look good. It's just, you know, when you're a concrete finisher, you're pretty fussy about how things look. You just want to make sure everything looks really good. That way, you know, when the owners show up here, the people who are paying the bill, when they show up and take a look at this before the generator gets on it, their first impression is going to be, wow, man, that thing looks pretty nice. And that's really all you're looking for as a contractor, is just the people who are paying you, you want to make sure they're happy. All right, so Luke's going to get ready to start the broom here. We got a 3-foot broom we're using today. You could use a 2-footer. This is actually a concrete broom. It's kind of a medium, what you call like a medium coarse broom. You could use a fine one here if you want. What we just want to see the paste on the concrete, get the broom texture. If you're pulling that broom across the surface and you can see some rocks under there kind of rolling, if it's pulling up rocks with it, then you're too early. And you could mag that back out nice and smooth and let it sit for another 15 or 20 minutes if that's the case, but today it's not. You can see even without Fresno in this, without hand troweling it, it still has a nice like medium broom finish. This doesn't have to be a super light broom finish on this. You know, it's just an exterior generator pad. Now, if it was a pool deck or maybe a walkway, a sidewalk or something, maybe we wait 15 minutes and then broom it. But for here, this is going to be perfect. Now, we don't have to put a joint in this either down the middle. 6.5 by 17, 9 inches thick with a matter rebar. This thing isn't going to crack. I can tell you right now from experience, it won't crack. And if it's got a good subbase under it, that's gravel, that's been compacted, it won't crack, especially with that styrofoam under there. So we're going to go without a joint, and I'm confident it's not going to crack. And then we'll retool the edges just for like a picture frame look. But being 9 inches thick with a matter rebar, with fiber mesh reinforcement in here, this thing's going to be perfectly fine just the way it is. I mean, this is thicker than most concrete driveways that I've seen done. So, you know, to hold just a generator like that versus a car or a truck, no problem here. So look, guys, if you want to learn how to do this, the Concrete Underground, the link for it's down below. I have all my training videos in there where I teach how to do forming like this. you know, how to pour concrete, how to finish it, how to do broom finishes, power trowel finishes, stamp concrete finishes, all the same stuff that we do. If you go back through any of my videos, I've got training videos in there that teach you how to do all this stuff. So if you're looking to be a concrete finisher, if you want to go into business for yourself, these are the kinds of things you should know, and they're all in there. Luke's going to finish that out. Doesn't that look good when he puts the picture frame on it? It's just nice and easy back and forth. He doesn't want to push down too hard. He just wants to make sure he leaves a nice, consistent, smooth edge all the way around that. That edge still has a little bit of texture on it, so it's not 100% sealing up the surface. And then they should have no problems here with freezing and thawing. You know, what they probably should do is still spray some concrete sealer on here. We do that if we get asked to, but we don't do that like normally. Well, again, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Like the video, share it. Come on back. We'll see you on the next one.